Look at the gridlock here at this border crossing. When nations withdraw from free trade agreements, like Britain during Brexit, the immediate physical result is thousands of trucks stalled at customs, waiting to pay tariffs or clear quotas. This is the friction of trade policy. To accurately measure the national cost of these border frictions, economists cannot look at the entire global economy at once. We have to freeze that complexity, strip away the macroeconomic noise, and isolate a single industry. We call this the partial equilibrium framework. It operates on a strict analytical constraint. We assume that whatever trade policy we apply to this specific market will not ripple out and change the exchange rate or alter the rest of the economy. We start by constructing a baseline domestic market. Let's say wheat. In total isolation, this market is governed entirely by the intersecting lines of home supply and home demand, which dictate the internal price. Trade policy is the artificial disruption of this isolated market. But before measuring the damage of a tariff or quota, we must establish the exact mathematical state of what happens when borders open. In the home market, dropping prices widen the gap between consumer demand and producer supply. Sliding this exact horizontal distance to a right-side panel plots the first import demand point. As prices rise, this gap shrinks, providing the second point, proving the curve slopes downward. Now we apply the exact same logic to the foreign market, but in reverse. We need to find the foreign export supply, the excess wheat foreign producers have left over after fulfilling domestic needs. This diagram shows the foreign market on the left. At a higher price, foreign farmers grow far more wheat than foreign citizens want to eat. That excess supply, plotted on a new axis to the right, creates an upward-sloping export supply curve. We now have a country wanting to buy and one wanting to sell. Overlaying these curves on a single graph creates a unified world equilibrium model. Their exact intersection dictates the free trade world price and the total volume of goods traded. This point is the baseline mathematical state of nature. Every tariff, quota, and subsidy we analyze from here on is an act of geometric distortion against this exact coordinate. A specific tariff is a fixed tax levied on every unit of an imported good. For anyone shipping goods across a border, it acts identically to an unavoidable cost of transportation. Looking at our world equilibrium chart, we can visualize the tariff as a physical wedge. It is driven directly between the import demand and export supply curves, forcing its way to the left of our free trade intersection. The height of this wedge represents the tax. The top edge pushes the domestic price in the home country upward, establishing a new, higher tariff price. Simultaneously, the bottom of the wedge forces the foreign export price downward. Foreign suppliers have to eat part of the tax by lowering their prices just to keep selling their goods. Because prices are higher at home and lower abroad, fewer goods are shipped. The total volume of trade shrinks from the free trade baseline down to the new, restricted tariff volume. There is one crucial exception, the small country case. If a nation's market share is too small to dictate global demand, it cannot force foreign prices down. The foreign price remains static, and the home country absorbs the entire blow, pushing domestic prices up by the exact amount of the tariff. A tariff will always artificially inflate domestic prices, but its ability to extract a price penalty from foreign exporters depends entirely on whether the imposing country has enough global market dominance to move the needle. This graph isolates the home market, so we can rigorously account for the costs and benefits of this price hike. We have the original world price below and the new, higher tariff price above it. Producer surplus is the financial benefit domestic suppliers gain from selling goods at a higher price than they strictly required. The tariff artificially raises the market price, expanding their surplus by this exact geometric area. Consumer surplus is the difference between what buyers are willing to pay and what they actually pay. Because they now face a higher price, domestic consumers lose a massive block of capital, represented by these four areas combined. Notice the asymmetry. The capital extracted from consumers completely swallows the newly gained producer surplus. To balance the equation, we have to look at a third player in the market. The government collects taxes on every unit imported. Multiplying the tariff rate by the new, lower volume of imports yields the exact revenue captured by the state. To find the true national impact of the policy, we use a definitive net welfare equation. We take the total consumer loss and subtract both the producer gain and the government revenue. The geometry makes the reality clear. A tariff is not a tool of national wealth creation. It is a blunt mechanism of domestic wealth redistribution, siphoning capital directly out of the pockets of consumers to enrich domestic producers and state coffers. If we cancel out the overlapping areas of capital transfer on the graph, the true net effects of the policy remain. We are left with two triangles and one rectangle. Triangle B is the production distortion loss. Because the tariff artificially inflated prices, domestic producers wasted resources manufacturing goods that could have been purchased much more cheaply from abroad. Triangle D is the consumption distortion loss. This represents the sheer economic value of transactions that were outright destroyed because consumers were priced out of the market entirely. Rectangle E is the terms of trade gain. This is the value the home country successfully extracted from foreign suppliers by forcing them to lower their export prices. The ultimate calculus for a large country is simple. The national welfare only improves if the value of the green rectangle is larger than the absolute waste represented by the two red triangles combined. But if we apply the small country rule, the geometry is unforgiving. Without the market power to force foreign prices down, the green rectangle disappears entirely. The policy generates an unambiguous, mathematically proven loss in national welfare. An export subsidy operates as a tariff in reverse. Instead of taxing incoming goods, the government pays a financial bonus to domestic firms for every unit they ship abroad. In the export subsidy diagram, the wedge is driven in the opposite direction. Home prices skyrocket, foreign prices plummet. It generates identical red distortion triangles, but creates a terms of trade loss. The exporter pays to lower its own global prices. While tariffs can theoretically benefit a large country, export subsidies result in a net loss of national welfare in every geometric scenario. The European Union's Common Agricultural Policy stands as history's most expensive validation of this exact geometric model. Beginning as an effort to protect rural incomes, the EU guaranteed artificially high support prices to European farmers, entirely decoupling them from the reality of world markets. The immediate physical consequence of this price floor was massive overproduction. Farmers yielded millions of tons of food that the European consumers refused to buy at the inflated prices. The EU was forced to step in, buying and stockpiling the surplus in massive cold storage facilities. Look at the cap graph. The support price was set far above free trade equilibrium, creating a massive gap of surplus output. To dispose of rotting stockpiles, the EU implemented aggressive export subsidies, simply to dump goods onto the global market. The financial cost of this distortion was significant. Tens of billions of taxpayer euros were spent annually to maintain the artificial prices and pay for the disposal of the resulting surplus. When governments attempt to defy market equilibrium by guaranteeing high producer prices, they lock themselves into subsidizing persistent deadweight losses. An import quota takes a different approach. Instead of a tax, it is a direct physical restriction on the maximum volume of incoming goods allowed across the border. By artificially restricting the supply of a good, while domestic demand remains high, buyers inevitably bid the price up. The result is the exact same set of geometric distortions and efficiency losses as a standard tariff. In the quota graph, government tax revenue is missing. It becomes quota rents. Since imported goods are bought at the world price and sold at the inflated domestic price, private individuals holding import licenses capture the entire profit margin. A voluntary export restraint, or VER, is a variation of the quota administered from the exporting country's side. This was seen when Japan agreed to limit their auto exports to the United States in the 1980s. The primary cost of a VER is that because the exporting country administers the limit, the quota rents are extracted by foreign competitors, ensuring a net loss for the importing nation. Other policies, like local content requirements, bypass rents altogether. They simply force manufacturers to use a mix of cheap foreign and expensive domestic parts, creating an inflated average cost that is passed directly to the consumer. Non-tariff barriers often offer politicians the illusion of clean market protection, but the geometry shows they generate the exact same efficiency losses as tariffs, while surrendering the financial upside to private or foreign interests. Comparing our four major trade policies, tariffs, export subsidies, import quotas, and voluntary export restraints, a rigid pattern emerges. There is a universal constant. Domestic producer surplus unambiguously increases. And there is a universal casualty. Domestic consumer surplus unambiguously falls. Regardless of the specific instrument chosen, the underlying model shows the same result. Protectionism lowers overall national welfare, transferring wealth from the general population to specific domestic industries.